Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here. And thank you to John Ireland from NTP Technologies, who's going to present to us today and has the courage and grit to put up with the suggestions and questions that people will pose during the meeting. Luckily, it's a benevolent group and a bright group, so the beauty is it's recorded. John, you get a copy of it, and therefore you barely have to listen when people make suggestions because it's all recorded and you'll be able to digest it later. But everyone, thank you for being here. I'm sure some will continue to join. 1 Million Cups is all about caffeinating entrepreneurs and promoting entrepreneurship, education, opportunity, so that people can come and exchange ideas. There's no risk because it's your content and it stays here. Even though we do make it public and all of our presenters are comfortable with that. Hey, check in on the mobile app. And if the mobile app isn't working, please check in on the website to register. The foundation, which funds over 160 chapters, really appreciates that. Here are the organizers and the ambassadors, many of whom are in the room. Everyone knows that we would love to have more ambassadors and more organizers. And as you become more involved in our group, we welcome your leadership skills to pick up and run one of the couple of functions that are important to keeping every Wednesday morning very, very special for 1 Million Cups attendees. So please think about that. Quickly read this and step back for a moment. We're all about the educational experience and helping each of us figure out our uniqueness and value proposition. Next slide, please. Certain important pillars. You can't raise money here. I think everyone's heard this before. The foundation makes it clear we're not about networking. And the truth is, the folks in the room, for the few people who are newer or newest, the other people who are in the room, I can call in a minute and I get a call back. Simple as that. That's a great thing. I may have just a question about my business or an idea for them. It doesn't matter. And that's a great thing. It only happens after you've been around for a while. So please come all the time. It makes a difference. So we have two sponsors. I'll do Office Evolution, and then I'm excited to introduce Ken Portney, the Profit Planner. So John Yu could not be here today. John Yu runs a fantastic office location right in Tyson's where you can have reception, mail, and phone service all the way up to full office services. It's a first-class location and a first-class service, and he's been a sponsor for a very long time. Ken, ball's in your court. You are on mute.
This is my last time in this round as coffee sponsor, so I'd like all of you to do as I do. Lift up your cups, show your caffeine. We are caffeinating entrepreneurship here, and it's a pleasure to be able to support 1 Million Cups. The Profit Planner is about helping small business owners, help them to develop professionalized financial processes in their business to improve their profits, to extend and grow their profits, and to subsequently create sustainability in their business. If you don't have profits, you won't have a business for long. Ken Portnoy, the Profit Planner.
Thank you so much, you both guys. Our virtual meetings ask that you use hand icons and mute yourself, and we'll eventually get to a Q&A after John's presentation. And I think you all understand this page, so we can move on. Next page, please. Great. You know, it's really important, and most of us don't really think that it could ever be us, but in fact, some of us could easily insult a presenter by the way we phrase something. So first, certainly introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't already, but to the main point, don't tell the presenter you disagree with them or try to one-up them, okay? Think about starting with the what word in your question, as opposed to why. Makes people less defensive, but also just read the bullets and get the point that we want to be supportive of the presenter and not in any way offend the presenter. Next slide, please.
I think at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and John will begin sharing.
Great. John Ireland, NTP Technologies, thank you so much. Please welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for everybody being here. Not to worry, I'm originally from New York, specifically Long Island, so I have pretty thick skin when it comes to people making comments about stuff. So just be prepared for me to fight back, though. I think that's from my youth. Anyway, thanks again for everybody for having me. We're going to talk about something kind of different. It's a pretty big scale issue that's happening all over the world, and it's about fertilizer. So there's 8 billion people in the world, soon to be 9 billion people, somewhere around 2035. More people, more food, more fertilizer. Unfortunately, synthetic fertilizer negatively impacts our air, soil, and water. And farmers today are looking for alternatives. It's a $200 billion worldwide market. 60% of that market is nitrogen-based fertilizers. Currently, we're targeting forward-thinking farmers, and we're running some pilots. NTP provides affordable on-site salt-free organic fertilizer using only air and electricity. So in terms of a global challenge, you know, it's kind of like, how do we feed the growing population in a sustainable fashion? That's something that a lot of people are working on all over the world. In terms of the 1 Million Cups challenge, how does NTP increase its pilots through strategic partnerships and get the message out about a new alternative fertilizer? So kind of think about that a little bit as we're going through all these slides, and then we can talk about it a little bit more towards the end. Without synthetic fertilizers, half the population would starve. I can see on the left-hand side, as population increases, fertilizer use increases pretty much 1 for 1. Total fertilizer production around the world, you can see kind of the numbers in terms of millions of tons, and this is a little old, but it still holds true today, and 60% of that is nitrogen fertilizers. Again, it's a 200 billion worldwide market. One of the things, just to kind of go back to some basic organic chemistry, plant science, plants need nitrogen. They need it for chlorophyll, which promotes photosynthesis. It's kind of what makes the plant green. Amino acids for building blocks, which kind of gives that plant kind of its structure. It's also part of the energy storage and ATP of plants, as well as nucleic acid, which is kind of their DNA. And plants need nitrogen, preferably in terms of nitrates. And that's kind of what the plant really absorbs through when it actually drinks water. It actually drinks its nitrates that's necessary for it to actually survive and flourish. Other types of nitrogen that's out there needs nitrogen fixing or some sort of microbial content in order to change the nitrogen into usable nitrates. Unfortunately, this leads to waste, especially if applied in the early stages. So if you're throwing granular fertilizer down, that has to actually convert it to nitrates for the plant to use. To give you an idea of this types of technology, early in the 1900s, there was a company called, a group called Birkeland Ide. And these two gentlemen invented ionizing air, and they turned it into nitrates, and they were actually pretty successful. Unfortunately, somewhere in 1920, the Haber-Bosch process came along. And a lot of people are a little more familiar with Haber-Bosch process. They actually take natural gas and air and turn it into ammonia, which is a precursor to synthetic fertilizer. Unfortunately, it produces a lot of CO2. But the reason it really took off was because it was cheaper. Natural gas was a byproduct of the oil industries. So they found a way to actually convert natural gas, which really wasn't being used, into fertilizer, a very usable product. Unfortunately, there are a lot of unintended consequences. Think about like plastics. Fertilizer is the same way. We end up using fertilizer, it contaminates our soil, our air, based upon the production of nitrous oxide, as well as the production of the fertilizer itself in terms of CO2 emissions. It also contaminates our water. All these algae blooms you're hearing about, a lot of it has to do with too much nitrogen that's actually in the water, which comes from runoff from farms, golf courses, etc. So what we're looking to do, we're looking to take this Birkeland Ide process, bring it into the 21st century, and actually use this process today as an alternative to synthetic fertilizers. And we think the time is right, mainly because a lot of technology developments have happened in the last 100 years. Plus, Haber-Bosch process is really contingent upon natural gas prices. Availability is tough. It's really controlled by a lot of large organizations in terms of international conglomerates. And we're looking to kind of give fertilizer sort of back to the farmer. We have a plan for growth. We're targeting our forward-thinking farmers, vertical hydroponics, indoor farming, organic farms, small farms, sort of our first target market. And then we're looking into eco-conscious groundskeepers. We start looking at golf courses, municipalities, colleges, and anybody that's got turf fields. Ultimately getting into the large farms and row crops, which is sort of the corn, wheat, soybean, etc. This is a little bit of education in terms of the 4 R's of farming. A lot of people are moving into this type of concept, which is applying the right product at the right time, at the right rate, in the right place. I talked to a corn farmer the other day. What he does is he puts down 50 pounds of nitrogen fertilizer before he even plants a seed. Half of that gets run off if rain happens. And then 3 weeks later, he puts another 100 pounds down. Well, the plants don't actually need all that fertilizer at that particular time. So he's not really putting it at the right time. It's just, that's the way we've been doing it for years. So education is going to be a key to changing practices and actually starting not only to use our product, but also for people changing the way they farm. And people have heard of regenerative farming, they've heard of biostimulants, they heard of better soil conditions, and we could talk about all these things a little later if people are interested. In terms of, and this is kind of what I was talking about, that corn farmer. So he put down all this 150 pounds, and the soil produces a little bit through microbes and nitrogen fixing. However, the application is tremendous, but the plant only uses a certain amount, and there's a lot of runoff. What we're looking to do using the 4R, we're looking at microdosing, which is actually applying at the right time, which means the plant gets a lot of usage of the materials being applied, but there's very little runoff. So NTP delivers quality nitrogen the way farmers want it. It's organic, salt-free, it's on-site, no transportation or storage, it's consistent quality. It's a single ion production, so therefore there's no contaminants. Customized solution. In other words, we're modular and scalable. We can actually build a machine to actually fit your size farm. So that kind of talks about the big stuff. Talking about local farmer problems, they got price volatility right now. Nitrogen fertilizer increased 300% over the last couple of years. They got poor availability, if you could get it, even at that price. Product quality, obviously with high demand, you end up quality tends to suffer with people producing more and more product. Again, and the typical application challenge is crop yield and waste. And of course, it negatively impacts our air, soil, and water. Again, our solution is affordable. It's available on site, controllable, reliable, easy to apply. There are no salts and contaminant free. And we could be zero greenhouse gas emissions if you're using renewable electricity in order to power the system. To give you an idea of our machine, we basically take electricity and air, again, preferably renewable energy. We ionize that air and we generate nitrates. The nitrates are then bubbled through water. We use the water as a delivery mechanism. We call our product nitrogen enriched water, or the product actually coming from the machine. Our real product is actually the machine. This particular machine is what we call our N Lab. It's about the size of a microwave. It can handle about 2 acres. It only produces 25 to 30 pounds of nitrogen fertilizer a year, which is not very much at all. Our next size machine, which are actually designed, is about the size of a refrigerator. It can handle it's targeted to handle about 100 acres. It's in the design phase, and it's designed to be scalable and modular, of course, with low capex and on-site delivery. Here's a vertical farm. You can see the benefit of the nitrogen enhancement in the leaf color compared to our baseline plants in the system. So you can see how greener it is, and it looks a little crisper, and that's because it's getting the nitrates that it actually needs in order to grow a healthy plant. Our go-to-market strategy, we've got kind of direct to farmers right now. Our N Lab is offered mostly for testing right now. We've done a couple of pilots. You use past testing the testing period is a fixed monthly fee regardless of production. Our N Plus is kind of free installation for the first 100 farmers, no production fee for the first 6 months. Ultimately, we'd like to become an appliance on the farm. Just like you got a dishwasher and refrigerator, we'd like a nitrate generator on the farm. The farmer can use it at any particular point in time. So there's a lot of influences and partners out there that can help us out. There's land grants extension institutions. And I don't know if people are familiar with those. There's a lot of industry consultants out there, thought leaders in ag technology. Of course, commission papers on applications. So we know the technology works. It's worked 100 years ago, it works today. The idea is, can we get it economical? And can we actually show farmers that it works? Because a lot of the farmers that were around 100 years ago to see it working, not really around today. In terms of partners, we're talking to sensor companies, analytic companies, sprayer companies, some irrigation companies. These are different people that can actually help us get our product into the market. So just to give you a little background, we've had some awards. DEIC, we won the pitch competition last year. We went through an ICAP program for SBDC. Cleantech Open, we were in a regional winner, top 4 in the Northeast, and then the top 6 nationally. We won the big launch, or came in second place in the Big Launch Challenge, which is down in North Carolina. And right now we're part of the Ag Funder Grow International or Impact Accelerator. Out of 600 applicants, we were in the top 10. I was actually in Singapore about 2 weeks ago. So back kind of to those challenge questions. How does NTP increase its research and engage strategic partners to increase awareness of alternatives to synthetic nitrogen fertilizer and its application? And of course, I'd like to hear what everybody thinks about kind of their take on feeding the world. Is it important to you, and how do you plan on making a difference? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John. If you want to leave the challenge questions up, that would be great, or we can drop it in chat as well. Let's give John a round of applause. Thank you again. That was a big dose of science to go with our big dose of coffee. So hopefully we're all awake now, or scratching our head and wishing we'd studied science a little bit more in middle school and high school. But that was really helpful and very clear. For folks attending, please drop your questions in chat or your suggestions. You can raise your hand using the recognition icons in the Zoom bar as well. And again, just going back to the challenge question, based on what John shared, who are strategic partners that he could think about collaborating with in order to accelerate and launch the pilot, or expand the pilot, I should say, as well as things like gaining research insights and papers for credibility as they grow to expand. Yay, John Foster. Please start us off.
I just can't even resist, John. I got to tell you, what a way to start a Wednesday morning. Yeah, and this is certainly near and dear to my heart. I work with a local restaurant called Green Fair, if you couldn't guess by my Hollywood Square up there, Green Fair Health and Wellness. And we are a 100% organic restaurant, and certainly, you know, all this stuff is really important to us as well. I'm curious, just from a cost standpoint, the farmer, and then also, how did this fit into the organic, you know, the organic world?
Sure. So I'll start with the organic part first.
Sure.
So we're working on, you know, you got to become certified to become organic. A lot of, you know, people say, what's the difference between an organic farmer and a regular farmer? You know, organic farmers spray at night. So the idea of having to get the organic certification is going to be something we have to work on. However, we are mimicking nature. So I don't know if you're familiar, the way plants actually get nitrates right now, or one of the ways, is through lightning storms. So lightning ionizes the air, and then the rain actually brings the nitrates down to the ground. So all we're doing is mimicking that. We're kind of creating lightning in a box and actually ionizing the air the same way lightning does. We just pass the air through it, and we use the water again as a delivery mechanism. So I think that's, I don't think we're going to have too hard a time getting organic, but it's going to be something that we're definitely going to apply for, at the right time. It does cost a lot of money in order to do that. So we don't say we're 100% organic. We just say we're organic or natural or mimicking nature, I guess. Right. Better way of saying it. Yeah. In terms of cost to the farmer. So what our target numbers are, we kind of compare ourselves, since we're targeting smaller farmers, we compare ourselves to bagged fertilizer. So if you went out to Home Depot right now and bought a bag of fertilizer, it cost you about $16 per pound of nitrogen. Okay. And a lot of small farmers do that. They go to Home Depot, or they go to Tractor Supply or somebody to buy some of the fertilizer. Now you get to the next guys that says, well, look, we're a big farm, so we're going to buy it by the pallet. So if you start buying it by the pallet, you could probably cut that price in half, somewhere around $8. We're actually targeting for our next size machine, because our first machine is really a proof of concept machine. Our next machine, we're targeting about $3 to $5 per pound of nitrogen. Okay. We're not going to be able to compete with the guys that, buy directly from the manufacturer in truckloads and rail cars, that are actually, pushing 10,000 acres of corn to create ethanol and feedstock for cows. That's not our market. We're targeting the smaller farmer, the more local farmer, food security kind of types, people that are interested in organic, that are actually want to do a better job. And again, we're big proponents of regenerative farming and things like that. There was an article a couple of months ago. A guy's been doing regenerative farming for the last 5 years. He reduced his nitrogen fertilizer use by 25%. Well, that's great. What about the other 75%? Yeah. Where does that come from? Right. So again, we're just looking to be a tool that's out there. We think I try and compare it a little bit to solar as well, in the sense that, renewable energy competes against fossil fuels. But there's no one type of renewable energy. You've got solar, you've got wind, you've got geothermal, etc. Right? There's going to be a lot of different ways, depending upon your situation, in terms of actually what tool you actually use or what model you use for renewable energy. Same way here, depending upon where you are, your weather, your soil, the kind of crops you grow, etc. There's all kinds of newer technologies coming out there to help you grow more sustainably, more naturally, and keep your yields at the same levels. We just see us as being a tool to help you obtain that by providing you nitrates on site and on demand.
So I'm going to jump in real quick. Thank you, John, for sneaking in 2 questions for the price of.
Oh, sorry.
We appreciate that. That's all right. People with the name John are troublemakers. We can have this. I think Reggie Holmes has a question, and just a quick reminder, let's keep our questions and answers concise where possible, just so we can get as many ideas, insights in as we can. Reggie, go ahead. Good to see you.
Hello. Hey, John. Thank you for the presentation. I work with a organization that's like an organic advocacy watchdog organization with a national reach, and would love to make a connection there. They are the types of farmers that you talk about. They're very committed to sort of restoring the title and significance of what it really means to be organic, and taking it away from like the big corporations that have sort of infiltrated the process. So if that would be helpful, would love to make an introduction there. And also, I was wondering about the sort of how this impacts those farmers, like their workload, their work process. Like, does it make it more efficient? Does it save them time, save them money? I imagine that it does, beyond the environmental benefits, which are tremendous. But if I'm a hardworking American farmer, I mean, I'm interested in products that allow me to produce better crops, with maybe less time and less money and less effort involved. So I was wondering how the product actually impacts that for the farmer.
Sure. So it highly depends upon the type of farming you actually do. Okay, so let's take vertical farming or hydroponic farming, for example. They have a closed loop system. That system, circulates water and they add nutrients as needed. So some of the issues that they have are things like and this is a little bit of a simplification, but say I use calcium nitrate in my closed loop system. What'll happen is that the plants will use nitrates preferentially, and you have to keep adding calcium nitrate. Well, what happens is over time, calcium builds up in the system, and then you have to actually dump the entire system and start all over again. So the idea of being able to not have to do that and using our technology just to bubble up the nitrates directly into the system, the same way you might be right now bubbling up oxygen. So a lot of people use dissolved oxygen or try to add dissolved oxygen to their systems. When they do that, they use a bubbler. We can actually just tap right into that bubbler. So here's an easy way to add nitrogens directly to your system. And if you're a vertical farmer. Now, when you start getting outdoors, or let's actually move to another indoor farmer, say somebody that does drip irrigation. Here's another way. They actually mix up all their nutrients, and then they use drip irrigation to actually water their plants, whether that's a horticultural or food, but any kind of usually indoor growers use some sort of drip irrigation. That's another method. We can actually attach directly into that fertilization loop and add nitrates directly to their drip irrigation system. So that's another way. And then finally, just as a third, there's a thing called pivot sprayers. Pivot sprayers are out there basically irrigating crops. They do about 100 acres at a time, like a 100-acre pivot sprayer is about kind of the size of those pivot sprayers. We can actually put one of our machines right next to a pivot sprayer. As that pivot sprayer starts watering, we can actually add nitrates directly to it. Okay, which again gets to that micro dosing. I don't know if everybody picked that up. So the idea is not to dump a whole bunch of fertilizer on your crops and see what happens and see how much they need and overload them. The idea, which also kills your microbes in your soil, but actually just give them what they need. Again, 4 hours at the right time, the right concentration, and the right amount. Hopefully that was helpful.
And next question, Anita, welcome.
Thank you. I'm gonna okay. So I love everything about this. I volunteer for Save Soil. My husband's in climate tech. We're raising our son with all of these values. So I really, really, really appreciate you having an actual technology for this. I have 2 questions. I'll be very quick. I see the mission also is, curtailing unnecessary chemicals in the environment. So I'm all riled up. First question is, have you seen the business model of Pella to Lomi and how they introduced their compostable cases and then a tabletop composter? And I think their larger scale is going to be a farmer's compost model. So that's how they're going. And then the second question is if you've heard of My Climate Journey or MCJ Collective, and happy to chat one-on-one about either of those. And, I know a lot of entrepreneurs get questions that they've already thought through. So if this is any one of those 2, I apologize.
No problem. We're all for composting and organic type fertilizers. Okay, whether it's manure, whether it's cover crops, which you actually then push back into the soil. There's all kinds of different methodologies. The challenge is that they're a little inconsistent. When you use organic, do you have a question?
Yeah, I don't think I put that question out correctly. I was talking more about the business model. So your model is, you have a 2-acre model, and now you're scaling to a big, much bigger 200-acre model. What Pella and Lomi did was they went from a very small product to a home size model, and now they're scaling to a bigger model. And I'm just wondering if you know their business strategy and if that's something you would consider, like a Kickstarter type thing for the 2-acre model for smaller farmers and homes.
Right. So we've thought about Kickstarter and things like that, and we do have a plan. What's nice about the machine itself is that there's 2 ways to scale. One way to scale is to just make things bigger, right? You just make it all bigger. Right. Well, unfortunately, there are limits to that because we have a certain amount of power supplies, and our power supplies get too big when you make it bigger. So the idea is to, instead of make it bigger, make it kind of in parallel. So instead of having a machine with 1, plasma field, we have a machine with 5 plasma fields. So we've now increased production by 5. There's basically only three components to our system, which is a plasma generator or a plasma core, a power supply, and a compressor. And the compressor is pretty much off the shelf. The other two systems are actually proprietary to us in terms of technology. We then have the ability then to mix and match as we see fit. So we're designing our next size. Again, I mentioned the size of refrigerator. I reserve the right to say whether it was a dorm refrigerator or a sub-zero refrigerator, only because they are going to have different sizes when it comes to how much is actually needed out there. And again, since we like it to be an appliance, it's really not about how many acres you can do, and we're trying to get away from this. It's more about how much nitrogen you need at any particular point in time. Because if say you need, 1,000 pounds of nitrogen, okay, for your farm, but you're doing regenerative farming, you're doing soil health, well, that might drop down to 600 pounds of nitrogen on that same acreage. Well, that's great. So we want to size you for the nitrogen you're actually going to need. And that's why we're looking at making this very scalable and modular and give people the ability to say, this is how much nitrogen I need, not necessarily how many acres I have, if that makes sense.
John, can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
And maybe this will tease out some of Benita's question. As you think about scaling, how many farmers are you trying to scale and onboard this year versus next year?
Okay.
Let's say small farmers. Let's just pick that one example.
Yeah. So and our business model looks at somewhere doing, this year we're trying to get more testing done more than anything else as we design our next model. Next year is probably going to be, and we'd love to get about 50 farmers on board sometimes in 2024. That's kind of our target.
Perfect. Thank you.
And
Great.
they might be all
suggestion.
different sizes, by the way, just so you know.
No, that's perfect. Very helpful. John Rudenberg.
Sure. What have you found in current pilots? What has your experience been?
Sure. So to me, any good pilot, if it worked perfectly, you probably didn't design the pilot properly. You always need a little bit of feedback in order to help you move forward. The two pilots we did, one was in a vertical farm in Texas. One of the challenges they had, which was the pictures you saw, they actually had some very good success. Their challenge was more about measuring and monitoring. There's no great sensor out there for nitrate that's small and compact for what we're looking. And we're working again with about 10 to 12 different sensor companies in order to come up with the best sensor for the system itself. There are sensors out there using wastewater treatment plants that cost $20,000. The challenge these guys had was we need to know how much nitrogen we're actually pushing in and how much nitrogen we're pulling out, or the plants are actually using in order to push the nitrogen back into the system, which is great. However, the way they do it today is with electrical connectivity. When the electrical connectivity drops, they add more fertilizer. Well, electrical connectivity has to do with salt in the water. Well, we don't create salts. That becomes a problem when you're trying to measure nitrates. Okay, so that's one of the things we learned is that we definitely need better sensing technology, and we're working in parallel with sensing companies. The other one we noticed was that we had a 20% reduction in fertilizer use or nitrogen use in one of the systems, another vertical farm, and a 20% reduction in what they call pH down, which is a way they actually use to keep the pH in the system down. They dump all this basically acid in it. These are great results. Towards the end, we saw a little bit of an issue, and we're trying to figure out what it is. We started seeing at the very end browning on the edges. Now, our machine generates both nitrates and nitrites. Since you're a closed loop vertical farm, and this might get a little technical, sorry about all this, but the idea is that you have nitrate, you can have a nitrite toxicity if the nitrite toxicity if the nitrates accumulate too much. We only produce a small amount of them, but over time, say 6-8 weeks, we might be producing more than we need. So we're working on ways to actually pull the nitrites out of the system in order to make sure that the system doesn't, or the plants don't experience that as a potential issue. So that's sort of what we've experienced so far. I've done a lot of stuff at home and seen great results with it in terms of take 2 plants, feed nitrate to one and none to the other. It works. Everybody knows it works. The issue has always been the farmer needs something from a university study or something from an institute that says, this is going to work on my crops before I actually use it.
Okay, so let's keep going. Ken, you're next. And again, let's try to keep our answers concise, although you've been doing great, John, explaining it in layman's terms, I think, for everybody. Ken Portnoy, you're up.
Hi, John. Very, very impressive, very motivating. I'm not a gardener or a farmer, so but I wish I were, because it sounds like a great thing to get involved with. Also, your preparation for this presentation is just remarkable, thorough, and marvelous. But enough of that. I'm curious if you might be interested in an organization that is building an advanced substrate for vertical farms. They were participants in Loudoun County business competition for startups last year. I wish I were as good as Reggie and could remember their name, but I'm sure there's publicity about that Loudoun County Startup Award that you could identify. I'll try and do some research to find them and get back to you on it. But if you would be interested in talking with them about a potential partnership, they provide their unique substrate plus essentially full vertical build out lighting for internal vertical farms. If you're interested,
It doesn't have to be Kappa agriculture. That sound familiar?
you know,
No.
mullet, spring, poles, and stuff. They're based out of Loudoun County.
Okay, I'd love to talk to them. I mean, basically, a lot of those people have, you know, they're talking to the same customers we have. Right.
Exactly why it would be worthwhile to be talking to them.
Yep. No, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Kim Portnoy. Just a couple of thoughts, and John, we spoke about these yesterday, but I'll share them for the group. Yeah, George Mason has a program around sustainability, which also includes doing farming and testing. So if you're looking for a research partner, that might be a group to look at, and I can help make introductions there. I also think looking at organizations like 4P Foods, who work with a lot of local farmers in this area. From a strategic partnership standpoint, it sounds like you need multiple. And one of the things we discussed yesterday, which I think is worth bringing up, is inviting some of these different stakeholders to be on an advisory board. I think as your organization is looking to pilot and scale, you may want to consider what that looks like. That's not something you have to pay people, right? It's a different structure than a board of directors. There's not the same fiscal responsibility or fiduciary responsibility. I mean, hopefully they are responsible with their advice, but it's a lighter structure and easier to manage. And there's something called a flash board where you could invite people just to be on the board for 6 months. So you can keep it time bound, which might be of interest. But I think as you look at monitoring companies or universities or local businesses or regional national businesses, starting that advisory board might make sense, and happy to identify some folks for that.
That'd be great. Thank you very much. I agree with you. We are looking at expanding our advisory board at this point in time.
Dan Linder.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. And John, thank you for your presentation today. Very interesting. I'm looking at the your second question is compelling. What is your take on feeding the world? Is it important to you? And of course, the answer is probably everyone is yes. But I'm looking at the numbers for you said your device would produce enough nitrogen for like 2 acres or something like that. And keeping in mind the explanation that you gave to Vanita about it's not necessarily the amount of nitrogen, it's the micro dosing, it's the right amount of nitrogen. And I'm thinking about you said a device for 100 acres would be about the size of a refrigerator that's underway. And I'm thinking about that second question. Farms that really produce a lot of food, I mean, they don't have 100 acres, and they certainly don't have 2. They have several hundred, if not several thousand acres. So I'm thinking, is your solution really geared towards? I mean, it sounds like you're scaling up, but it sounds like your solution that's available today is geared towards a really small micro farmer. So can you talk a little bit about that, about the size of your devices, and if we're really going to impact the food supply? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And I don't want to, offend people here, but one of the issues is that on a global basis, 80 to 90% of the farms in the world are 2 to 5 acres. Okay, so in this country, we're most used to seeing people and seeing farms and articles and news about these massive farms and this massive acreage. Unfortunately, that massive acreage, a lot of it goes like is corn and goes to ethanol, or it goes to, not food. I don't consider, high fructose corn syrup really food, but that's where it actually goes to, right? Whereas all around the rest of the world, there are, 2 to 5 acre farms that are trying to feed their communities. Okay. So there's a big disconnect right now and a challenge for us when it comes to US based versus international kind of markets. US based markets are more about, if I tell you, we're having a fertilizer shortage, the only impact you're going to see is, an extra $1 in terms of the cost of your head of lettuce. In other parts of the world, you're actually going to see people starving, people not being able to feed their communities, governments extremely worried. There's a bunch of stuff that's been going on. India stopped exports of wheat a little while ago. And the reason they did that because they were worried about feeding their own populations. So our technology has the ability, in that 100 acres, the way we see it on an international market, is tying our 100-acre kind of machine with a solar system or some sort of local renewable energy that allows us to drop a machine anywhere in the world and actually feed a community of farmers, say anywhere between 20 to 50 farmers in a community, so they can actually then feed their community and actually produce product that they might actually take to market somewhere. So yes, I agree with you that it appears to be that we're targeting these local markets or very small markets. Just to know, also to let you know, vertical farming is growing somewhere 25% a year all around the world, especially in Asia. I was just in Singapore. Singapore has a 30 for 30. They want 30% of their food to be grown by 2030 in their country. The only way they're going to do it is vertical farms. The Middle East, Dubai and Oman and all these places are looking at vertical farms to solve their problems. So that small market, I think, is growing, which is great for us. Also, to take a look at it, is a $200 billion market. So it is pretty big. So you don't need that much of it, obviously, which is a typical entrepreneurial answer to, something which isn't very valid sometimes. But this is a big market. So we do have the ability to target smaller farms and just look at more of them, you could say.
Thank you. I mean, I definitely, in Northern Virginia, we're getting rid of our farms to build data centers, and so I think small farms are probably they're a reality, right?
Well, I actually, just to add on to that, our climate czar, John Kerry, wants to say, hey, farms, you have to stop. Daniel, stop shaking your head. Our farms have to actually go away, the small farmers, because they don't have the capacity. They produce too much nitrous oxide. So they're looking to buy out small farms. Well, the whole concept of food security sort of goes away. And I get why they're having these talks, is because where people are and where food is, they say, let the Midwest handle our food and we'll just import everything. But a lot of people are much more concerned about where they're going to get good, local, fresh food. Nutrient value of food is terrible. 96% of lettuce comes from Southern California. By the time it gets to your mouth, it's about how long it's been decaying, not about how fresh it is. So, and we're trying to solve some of those problems, or at least some small farmers are, and we're trying to help them out.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Dan. That was a great question. We have a couple of minutes for a few more questions or thoughts. Ken Portnoy?
So I'm not familiar enough with the technology to understand whether this is feasible, but it seems to me that beehives are needed at certain parts of the cycle for growth. And so beehive owners show up, drop a beehive, bees do their thing, they pick up the beehive and move on. Is that a model that might be appropriate down the road quite a ways for the delivery of nitrates through your technology? Put a bunch of refrigerators on a truck, show up at a farm, do the thing at the point in time in the growth cycle that they need it, pick them up, move on, up and down the geography to where the seasons are.
Okay, I will say yes and no. Again, there's with such a big market, there's all kinds of different farmers. Our ideal customer is someone that grows 365 days a year. Somebody that has what they call high velocity crops that are turning over, your lettuces, your strawberries, things that turn over pretty rapidly, and you need continuous supply of nutrients to these types of farms. The guys, and again, since you're trying to do that microdosing, showing up and applying a whole bunch doesn't really do any good. You'd have to show up multiple times. With that being said, though, talk about the international market and you're serving, say, 20 to 50 farmers. There's no reason why you wouldn't have a central location with a very large machine that then goes out and, part of the local business is the person who owns this, say, co-op, has the ability to go out and actually irrigate. It goes and irrigates 3 farmers over here and then 3 over here, and always comes back to the main place. But you got to remember, that's really a community-based thing. So you're not going more than a couple of miles away. You know, you're not looking to go 100 miles to go deliver something, because a lot of it is dependent upon water. With that also being said, though, there's a lot of big trucks out there that are actually doing irrigation. They actually drive right through the system. So can we put a refrigerator basically on the back of a truck? So as it's actually using its 2,000 gallons of water and watering it, we're actually microdosing it at the same time. Those are all viable options, but again, it depends upon where you are, the type of farm you have, the kind of farmer you are, and how you actually want to apply your fertilizers.
Hey, Jen, I see that you have your hand up. Do you still have a question?
Well, I had a thought that actually, I did have a question. You mentioned international markets, but I wasn't sure. Are you trying to pilot and scale in international markets or just domestic right now?
So we're focusing domestically, and we actually like to focus in Virginia. So we're looking for a lot of people here because it's easier to deal with them, right? And go back and forth. On the other hand, we also joined the Grow Impact Accelerator, which is an accelerator that's actually based in Singapore. So I was actually out in Singapore about 2 weeks ago for the start of their boot camp. We met a whole bunch of people that are very interested in piloting our technology. So we're going to be taking machines and probably sending them internationally to either institutions or vertical farmers that are looking to do some additional testing. So it's kind of parallel, but they are definitely sort of different markets. We struggle with diluting our mind share to going into two different markets. But I'm an empty nester. My kids just all graduated like last week, so I'm good to go.
And so as a follow-up question or thought, I mentioned a company in India in chat. Their name is Orja Solutions, OORJA. They're installing solar in small farms in India. And so there might be some very specific organizations, social, entrepreneur-minded organizations to collaborate with. So happy to make that introduction. Globalgoodfund.org is an organization that does a lot of the social entrepreneurship work. That company is actually a fellow in that organization. They're accepting applications now. So if you are interested in trying to potentially get in front of a different audience, different funding, that might be an organization to look at. Ken, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to ask a question, and then I will get back to sharing our slides and wrapping it.
Great, it's quick. Do you have the funding to buy academic research? You said you wanted to get papers on the street.
Yeah, well, that's part of the problems is that we've talked to a couple of institutions. They want $30,000 to do an actual study. However, we are teaming up with New Mexico State University, who actually has grant money for their actual professors. So we can actually the grant money goes to the professors, not to us, but what we get is the testing responses actually from them. And there are other universities that are interested in doing that. It depends where their funding comes from and how we can actually work with that. And there's a lot of things that are going on and Jen, you can yell at me at some point in time. There's a lot of stuff going on in the governments as well. Last year, there was the climate smart commodities. They just pushed out $3.2 billion to find ways to get organic foods and better climate strategies for farmers. There was also another group, another fund for US-based alternative fertilizers, $500 million from the government to do that. Unfortunately, they wanted a 40% match, which means the smallest fund of $1 million, the smallest grant, we'd have to come up with $600,000 even to apply in terms of matching funds. But there's good things going on. We believe that since like solar has a 30% tax rebate when it comes to actually, adding solar to farms. You talked about, Jen, there's the REAP program, which the government actually funds, which you get a 30% tax rebate for adding solar to your system and to your farms. Well, that's great. That's for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Why wouldn't they give us a 30% rebate on our machine? Because you got to remember, one of the big things we're doing is we're moving a operating cost of buying fertilizer every single year to actually purchasing a machine that's going to produce your material with fundamentally free inputs of air and solar energy.
So I'm going to jump in as MC. Jen, I'll turn it back to you and I see Vanita, you have a question. You're okay? Okay, because it'll be 10 a.m. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, just real quick, John, I'm going to send my climate journey to you again. Those people can help with get on policy and get funding. They're very, very, very impactful people.
Put it in
And
the chat. Will be great.
Thank you, Benita.
Jen, please feel free to ask the very last question.
What else can our 1 Million Cups community do to help you? Obviously, folks should save the chat. We'll make sure you get that, but what else can we do to help?
It's really about the connections, any kind of land grant universities, any institutions, any farmers that you think are kind of forward-thinking farmers, the ones that are interested in doing better and are interested in looking at new technology. I'm happy to talk to any of them, especially if they're local, because I can actually get to them and show them the system and show that it works.
So I'm still the MC to the end. So next slide, please. By the way, I have another question. What part of Long Island?
Garden City.
Okay, I grew up in Roslyn Heights. Next
Oh.
week is, there you go, man. Okay. So next week, Dark Horse Nutrition. We're thrilled and just look how we go from John's presentation. By the way, fabulous. Thank you so much. Really fabulous. Each week, we're fortunate to have great local entrepreneurs, not always local, I'll take that back, but entrepreneurs willing to stand up and present. And next week, we'll learn a little bit about health, as we did today. Next slide. So if you look closely, we have open meetings where we don't have presenters. So think about presenting. Think about someone you know who might present. That would be great. The organizers are assembling different panels and presenters. I call your attention to Mr. Ken Portnoy, who 2 weeks ago gave us a briefing on AI, which was fabulous. Okay, so look forward to more of those and step forward and be a presenter. 6 weeks ago, Reggie did it. So please know, so the first meeting of the month is next Wednesday, right? And it's in person at the MEC Center, Mason Entrepreneurial Center. Jen, any additional comments relating to that?
No, I would just say it's in person and virtual. So
In
please
person.
continue to join us virtually,
Yep.
and our presenter will be there in person. And if you're interested in being a coffee sponsor for June, I don't think we have one. If I'm wrong, please, I know someone will let me know. But if you're interested, let us know.
Excellent. Next slide. Upcoming events. Karen, is there anything you want to add to upcoming events?
Thanks, John, for asking. I just sent something over to Jen, and I think she's going to post it, but it is for a ribbon cutting. One of the companies here locally in Fairfax County is hosting a ribbon cutting and open house, and Jen is going to put the information in the chat for everyone, but all are invited.
Thank you, Karen. Other folks want to mention an event? Okay, next slide, please. The only pitch you're going to hear at one of our 1 Million Cups meeting is a pitch for talent, for leadership to come join a great group, some of whom are in the room today, who actually plan each of the week's meetings. So even though Portnoy did a heck of a great job a couple of weeks, as did Reggie Holmes, as has others in the room, it's the behind the scenes people who make the whole thing happen. So we'd love it if some of you would step forward and become organizers. Thank you. Join our team in building 1MC. Yeah, man. Is that Ken waving at me?
Yeah. Count me in.
There you go. That's awesome, man. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. There's a meeting today at 4 if you can join.
Send me stuff. See how easy that was for me, guys? You can
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. Oh, yes, please also, when you jump on social media or as simple as in your LinkedIn profile, add 1 million cups. It's so easy. And that QR code is to register. Am I correct? Isn't that what it is right there?
I think there are a couple of different links on it, but scan it and
Okay.
find out. Have some.
Yeah.
suspense.
Yes, because I've sent it to people and it's very easy. So finally, thank you first to John Ireland. Really appreciating your presentation and really look forward to hearing about your successes. By the way, I have all the answers to the challenge question, but I figured I'd wait till we have an opportunity to talk about it. But also to the Kauffman Foundation. You know, there's strength in numbers, both locally and nationally. There are over 160 chapters. We stand out because we meet every Wednesday. That's kind of special. Not every group meets every Wednesday, so you can be proud of that. And again, by being here every Wednesday, when you call or someone calls you, you'll pick up when you're available or return that call quickly, because that's what the community is all about. So everyone, thank you. We're 4 minutes early. It must be the MC's responsibility to be 4 minutes early. And so I open it up to additional questions and to fun. And again, John, thank you, man. That was great.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
I just gotta say thank you to Vanita for being here. Vanita and I met at the farmer's market on Saturday, so that was fun. And also I want to just point out that Jen Graydon is here as well, been listening in. Jen has been very interested in 1 million cups and has showed up this morning and hoping she'll show up again. Jen is the well, she does a number of things, but the one thing that I really like is she's the baker at Green Fair and does a phenomenal job. She's also a massage therapist and does a bunch of other stuff. So